After many years of infertility, Mike and Catherine never imagined themselves in the foster care system. But after they turned to international adoptions and that wasn't an option, they figured the best thing for them to do was to give a child a loving and caring home. After a few years in the foster care system, they adopted a little girl from Mexico. Per MLJ Adoptions of Mexico, a website about the adoption process that takes place in Mexico with the Hispanic families, the system in Mexico is private. A baby is placed up for adoption by the birth mom and not the government like most international adoptions. If it wasn't for Mexico, Mike and Catherine would have never had the experience that they have today and the loving family that they have. In large countries, international adoptions is being closed to the public. I believe that it's unethical to think that we should continue to close international adoptions to outside countries. Today, I'm going to express the arguments for pro-closed international adoptions, which are keeping children in their home countries, closed adoption helps those economies, and the national adoption is the best option. First, let's take a look at keeping children in their home countries. The first argument would be that keeping children in their home countries is more beneficial for that child. People think that the child has to stay in those home countries to have their heritage and the culture that they have. They're looking more at the country and the roots of that country for the family that that child has. But they're saying that they're losing their heritage. But a family is having a child with a loving and caring home. National Children's Fund, also known as the UNICEF, gave a statement about the homeless population of children in the world. UNICEF is estimating that there are 17.8 million orphans worldwide. 2 million of those are living in orphanages. In addition, millions of older orphans are living on the streets. I believe that moving children out of their home countries is all right. It's giving them a second chance of life and a hope for the future. They're not being treated the way that they should in those home countries. They're not being fed and they're not being loved, either on the streets or even in those orphanages. Would you rather have a child in their home country living on the streets or in orphanages and not being fed, or a child being taken out of their home countries and having a loving and caring home? Taking a child out of the home country is not the ideal situation, but if they're not being properly taken care of, taking that child out of that home country is the best situation. The power of a loving family surpasses all obstacles. According to an article written by Alan Greenwald that was written about both sides of the argument about continuing international adoptions or letting children stay in their home countries. Most social scientists say international adoptions have worked well for most children, including those from poor countries. Growing up in a rich country ensures that they will be well fed and guarantees them a home where they will receive nurturing that they might not have been able to receive in orphanages and other institutions. This is proving that although taking those children out of those home countries isn't the best option, it's giving them a second chance of life and a hope that they never had in those home countries. A Hugh Convention establishes rules and regulations that all countries must follow to ensure that international adoptions are made in the best interest of that child. Leaving that child's adoption up to the agencies and the parents, they're not going to put a child out of the country into an uncaring home. They're going to put them in the loving home and what's best for that child. Now that we've seen that taking children out of the home countries is the ideal situation, let's look at the economy in those countries. The next argument is that the closed adoption is helping those economies grow. Many people think that the economy will grow in many ways if they keep those closed international adoptions closed. Closed international adoptions becomes a marketplace for crime. High crime because of the high number of children that we're asking for. The high crime of rape, kidnapping, trafficking, and bribery because of the high number of the children that we're asking for. An article was written by a man named Scott Carney titled Meet the Parents, the Dark Side of Overseas Adoption, that interviewed and experienced the hardship firsthand. In 2005, though there was a lucky breed, a cop in Chimita heard reports of two men arguing loudly about kidnapping in a crowded bar. Under questioning, police say that men and two female accomplices admitted that they had been snatching children on behalf of the orphanages. That's a result of not managing the number, not of international adoptions as a whole. I believe that this is happening because there's no control of those numbers. If the United States created a system of a one-to-one adoption agency program, we could change that number and decrease that high crime dramatically. The economy would even rise with that number being controlled. They would receive income from those adoptions. They would have children off of the streets and out of the orphanages. They would have clean streets, which has a great tourism, and that could be extremely positive for that country. I believe that getting rid of the high crime and marketplace for that crime would increase the economy, that it would boom instead of bust. So now that we look to the economy, let's look at why national adoptions is not the best option. The last argument would be that instead of international adoptions, people should look at national adoptions. They might say that it's the popular thing to do to have international adoptions, that all the celebrities are doing it, that they say that it's more for the look of the family and not the family itself. I believe that's not the case in many family situations. I believe that if a family is willing to spend the money that it takes to have an international adoption, it's a long and thought out process. The average cost of an international adoption is $40,000 for a child. That's not a phase, that's a life choice. There's many complications that it comes with when you do national adoptions instead of international adoptions, during the process and even after the process of adopting. According to the National Adoption Center that creates laws and rules when it comes to national adoptions, there are many laws under the category of national adoptions, such as an adoption is considered to be high risk if the rights have not been terminated, and it is expected that they may not be because of the birth parent or other relatives will decide and be approved to be the parent. The adoption of a newborn infant is often considered a very high risk. When a birth parent has consented to an adoption, there is a time period which he or she can change his or her mind and revoke that consent. This time period varies often by states. So that child is placed up for adoption before they're even born. The family is awaiting their arrival eagerly. The adoptive parents are at the birth. They can either take that child from the hospital, or the birth mother at that time could say, I want to keep the rights of this child. So that family that has prepared their hearts and their homes for a child is now being ripped of that. Even if the child is taken home at the time of birth, that months and weeks could even pass by, and that birth mother could change her mind and say that she wants that child back at any moment. Looking toward international adoptions, that's not the case. Once the child is given to the parents, it's set that they are that child. I believe that international adoptions is easier for the family to prepare their hearts and their homes and know that that child is coming to that home. Today I have presented counter-arguments of the topic based on closed international adoptions and why I believe that we should open international adoptions to outside countries such as the United States and other countries. First, we looked at how keeping those children in their home countries is not always the best situation for that child. We've looked at how the economy can actually boom instead of bust in those international adoptions. And lastly, we took a look at how national adoptions has many complications and is not the best option for a family. Overall, let's look at Mike and Catherine, how they adopted a small child from Mexico. If it wasn't for Mexico and their international adoptions, they would not have a family and a lifetime experience that they have today. So this is why we should open international adoptions and continue to open international adoptions.